I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on GBN, we're exploring a powerful book. It is called 10 Dimensions of Kabbalistic Biology, the Abridged Edition. It is a bold new framework that blends biological science with the metaphysical architecture of Kabbalah. It is written by a terrific author. His name is Dr. Michael Kosoy, and in the book, he invites readers to consider life as a multi-layered system where what we can measure and observe emerges from deeper, largely invisible realms of information, organization, and meaning. Using the tree of life as a conceptual map, this book reframes biological complexity through 10 interactive dimensions, connecting the visible world to hidden structures beneath it. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him on TV today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Logan, for having me.
It's an honor to have you on the show. This is a remarkable book. Let me ask you, what sparked the idea to build a bridge, if you will, between biology and Kabbalah?
You know, it was just not one point. It was a long way, I can tell you. 30 years ago, as research biologist, I started work for U.S. Center for Disease Control. And the same year, I was enrolled in my first Kabbalah class.
Mm-hmm.
And originally, I didn't even expect how much this is learning from Kabbalah can enforce me as a scientist. And just let me explain, because I understand its title can be look a little bit too sophisticated and complex. Kabbalistic biology, it's very rarely you can see this combination of those words, right?
Right.
Biology and Kabbalah. And Kabbalistic biology, basically, I invented this. It's because in this book, I'm not intent to teach Kabbalah. I don't call myself Kabbalist, but I had very, very good teachers from whom I learned. So no principles. And I found that they can be very applicable to modern science. And for biology is science of life, right? It's actually literally, in Greek, it means science of life. But truth is, when we work as researchers, scientists, we cannot see most of biological life, all this whole complexity and all dynamism. And it's a very big limitation. Whatever we do in our laboratories, it's not wrong. It's just not enough to study life, because life is so complex. So this was my motivation when I started to work, and it took quite a bit of years to come. And I would maybe be honest, would continue to think about this. But last pandemic, I mean, COVID-19, it was really a point when I realized I need to talk about this. I need to explain why it doesn't work in this way as we expect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we collect so much information, data, and still we were not able to answer some very important questions.
Yeah.
If you agree with me.
Exactly. And some very important questions, perhaps the greatest questions of all, we really have no answers for. Let me ask you this. When you talk about the invisible world of life, what do you mean in either scientific terms or philosophical terms?
Yeah, I understand, especially from the person who work a lot of us microbes, right? You cannot see microbes. But I mean not this. If you take microscope, you can see bacteria. If you work with viruses, it's harder. You still can use electronic microscope, but you know it's something very small but visible with tools, if you use some proper tools. But in life, you cannot see everything. For example, you cannot see relations, right? For example, people talk about evolution, adaptation to environment. You cannot see evolution, right? And because people don't admit this, they sometimes can talk about, like, let's say, frequency of some genes or some characteristics. But it's not evolution. Evolution is a process. So this is what I mean. And
Yeah, absolutely. What problem in conventional biology does Kabbalistic biology aim to solve or clarify? You touched upon this a little bit, that the big questions biology can't solve or answer or clarify. Perhaps Kabbalistic biology can. What are some of those questions that we have?
But what I mentioned, we cannot see the process. We can see some objects, but we cannot see the process, how it's developed. And because we cannot see it, we just leave this behind. It's, it's something invisible. I don't know if you know this metaphor of street light.
Mm-hmm.
You know this? When one man, okay, it's a short story if you.
Sure.
So it's a very old story. So it's one man is looking for something on the street light, and another came and asked, "What are you doing?" I lost keys from my apartment. So they started to look together, and another guy asked, "Are you sure that you lost here?" And he answered, "No, but light is better here." It is kind of joke, but what we do in science is exactly what we do. What we know where we can look for, and be honest with you, where we have support, financial support, institutional support to do this, because it's very difficult to admit that you don't know something. You know what I mean? And it's natural because we know only a very small portion, and it's natural. But we try to make a very big decision based on those very limited pieces of information, and we basically claim it's what this is science.
Yeah. Exactly. We can't just work where the light is. We have to work in the dark shadows as well.
We need to embrace. We need to have bravery to embrace dark side.
Absolutely. Well, I always say, even when it comes to the Big Bang Theory, well, what was there before the Big Bang? I mean, you have,
exactly.
So what was before that? You can go on endlessly. Why was the tree of life the right model for biological complexity?
So let me go back again to this analog. So we cannot see, right? For example, we have light spot, but we always experience to be in dark area, right? For example, you can be lost in forest or in dark street, but we don't need to be panic, right? We can still get some information. We can hear some sound. We can touch something. And later, gradually, we can see even some contours, let's say. So we need to have ability to go out a little bit. What I'm trying to say, invisibility also has gradation. How it's apparent, some object or process. Why I refer to Kabbalah? Because for millennia, Kabbalah had dealt with something invisible. And they developed some tools how to perceive the word. Kabbalah, it's actually from Hebrew, it means to receive.
Yeah.
To receive even when it's not visible. And it's also important lesson because Kabbalah works with different levels of visibility. And it's quite unique for this tradition. Many like mystical experience in Eastern mysticism, they separate what is visible, real, physical, and invisible. And they stress invisible part. So visible, real, physical, it's like Maya, something kind of illusion.
Right.
But Kabbalah presents different layers, different planes of visibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And the invisible things in life are often the most profound. I think Helen Keller said that the most profound forces in the universe can neither be seen by the eye or heard by the ear, but actually felt by the heart. And that's always been a quote that stuck with me. Could you walk us through the 10 dimensions that you write about and what each level represents, or at least a few of them?
Well, surely to talk about each.
Yeah, we'll be here all day, right? Yeah. Well, maybe are there more important?
Okay.
Is there a hierarchy? Are there dimensions that are more important than others?
It's the same.
Yeah,
So tree
because
of
they're
life
interrelated.
combines
You can't have one
everything.
without the
Yes.
other. Yeah.
So basically, let me first to explain that Kabbalah teachings that there are different worlds, not just layers like gradual levels. Those really different words with different characteristic. They ask different questions. Physical world exists, right? We can measure, and we can, in this level, take, let's say, animal and measure what is length and weight. So it's something real. So we have data, right? And we connect those data with something else. We try to analyze, and we have information. And people quite often confused connection between data and information. They believe that if you have a lot of data, you probably heard the expression big data, right? You've heard about this. This genomic information, it's so huge database. So they believe the more data, you have more information, but information needs to be in form. It should be form. So it's different word. But the critical misunderstanding believes that information is not knowledge. Actually, I use what they call pyramid proposed by Akov. So it's 4 layers: data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And Kabbalah teaching that each of those levels, each words, it's really separate words. They have name, like Asiya, Itzira, Bria, Absolute. So those different words, absolutely. And if you cannot understand that accumulation of information doesn't bring automatically knowledge. You will stop because you're not prepared for this.
Right.
And Tree of Life basically present all those 4 words, but also they have system of, you mentioned Sefirot, and during class decades, those images became quite popular. Even people who don't know anything about Kabbalah, they've heard. So this image, and in each word, they have their own tree. And together, because they overlap each other, they create kind of ladder. You can use this ladder to go up. And using this system, I proposed 10 additional dimensions. And here, probably need to explain what I mean under dimensions, right? Because you usually can see only 3D, right? With geometrical dimensions, because we live in this world, we evolutionarily adapted our visual apparatus to see those 3 dimensions. Later, they started to talk about time as additional dimensions. So it can be. But dimensions is not only such kind of where you can measure by rules. It's more direction in which you can explore, right?
Yes.
And so this system of 10 Sefirot, which is, if I need to explain a little bit, Sefirot, it's plural of Sephira. Sephira, it's like channel of energies that go in life force, let's say, going from up to down. And those system in Kabbalistic traditions, those system of words that I mentioned before, they call alamot in Hebrew, they basically, it means filters. So they filter those words. And having this system of Sefirot, you can propose some additional dimensions. And originally, I thought we can use directly each of Sefirot as dimension, because some people thought about this, but basically I proposed system how to measure relation between Sefirot. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, it's not easy, but you need to admit that we have deal with very, very complex and dynamic reality, biological. So we cannot ignore this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. Does Kabbalistic biology change the way we understand cells, organs, ecosystems, or all of the above?
Uh, First of all, we need to admit whatever you mentioned, cells, genes, organisms, population, they exist in each of this world.
Mm-hmm.
It's only question how you can perceive this. And if you have this understanding, you need to know. For example, I will give you example
Sure,
because
examples are great.
cannot go from one of the actually first dimensions that I proposed. It's between it's two Sephirot, Malkuth and Keter. What it means, Malkuth, it's basically physical word, real word, what we can take, touchable, to measure. Keter is something complete unification. And in biology, in science biology, there is always big debate, serious debate, because most people now, most biologists, I would say 95%, they study from very mechanistical level. You know, that to take each cell or each organism and to measure. People on the other side, what they call holistic biology, they consider everything in relation, in unity. And as much as I admire this holistic approach, I also can find it's practically impossible sometimes when you need to answer very important, urgent question. So instead, I propose to have this spectrum from fragmentation to unity. And it's your choice. You need to choose. Nothing is wrong. You can stay in the lowest level and measure with ruler lengths of a mice.
Right.
But you need to understand this is level where you do. It's very important to collect collection of such kind of data. But you don't need to argue with some people who consider from higher level. This is just an example of one dimension.
Exactly. How have others in the academy, other scholars, other scientists, how do they view your metaphysical language when it comes to biological and scientific phenomenon?
And you probably realize I should be cautious when I talk about Kabbalah in academic environment. And it's not because it's something wrong, because it's, again, I go back to the question, people not ready to admit that they don't know in the area where they consider it high experts, right? But truth is how I define you, that you're expert in a particular area. You know better than anybody else how little you know, what is the limits of your knowledge. I can give you another example. When it was more than 12 years ago, I published a paper in journal Entropy. Entropy is basically not so uncertainty, right?
Yep.
And by the editor was first confused by such content, and it was about description of zoonotic diseases. It's my area of expertise. But second day he told, no, it's exactly what we need. Because my conclusion, when in specific examples, the more information we collect about everything, about pathogens, about reservoirs of infection, immunity, and so on, epidemics, the less certain our knowledge. It's paradoxical, right? Yeah. But so it's not easy to accept this. But not claiming this, I use my system in my practice. And in teaching my students, I was quite pleased when I gave a copy of my book to one of my former students, and he was, after that, in my laboratory, a fellow, completed Ph.D. And I gave him warning, it's a very strange book. Don't be, and he just laughed. I know you for 8 years. I was your student for a long time. I'm not surprised because it's what I learned from such kind of.
Amazing, amazing. After 25 years at the CDC, what experiences most shaped your thinking about hidden dimensions in life systems?
Um, I'm very proud that I work for CDC for so long time and I have wonderful experience with this organization. But one of the advantages that I had, because working with infectious diseases, I work with very different biological system. From, let's say, viruses inside to elephants than care bacteria. You understand? It's
Yeah.
from level of genetic analysis to ecosystem analysis. So this has helped me probably because I needed to move quite often from one point to another and to have this system of orientation. Basically, everything what I'm talking about, book, it's not giving some final recommendation. It's about presenting system of orientation and support that dependency.
Yeah.
When you're in the midst of epidemic, let's say, or any other disaster.
Yeah. How does your work in One Health connect to this book's central theme?
Well, because One Health, it's actually area where you need to always have orientation different levels. Otherwise, we have a lot of, it sounds good, One Health, and from one person, it can be a combination of whole life, right, at different levels. But most people, they consider very specifically like relation between diseases of people and animals. So it's again, you need to, and it's again, because it's not so clear what is area of this discipline. And people, instead of working together, sometimes just argue who is right. It's not question who is better. It's question of your point of view, and you can present to another person such kind of system so they can see from which point.
Yeah. What role do you believe consciousness plays, if any, in biological organization?
Again, I need to tell you, it's probably big misconfusion. Consciousness can be also at different levels. Animals also have consciousness. Even plants may have consciousness. And Kabbalah teaching this is about different levels of consciousness, about like mineral level, vegetation, plant, animals, and people. So it can be different levels. So it's again, with this system, you need to be aware of what we're talking about. This is consciousness is basically a level of your awareness, how you perceive knowledge or information. It depends what level you consider. And you need to be honest with you and transparent about your intent to move to another level, not just talking.
Yeah. Are the 10 dimensions meant as a metaphor, a literal structure, or a hybrid of both?
Actually, I consider this as working tool, what we can use. As scientists and laymen who just concerned about their health, about the environment, about infectious. Just one example, if we have time.
Sure.
Everybody heard about microbiome, right? They're concerned about microbiome. Microbiome, that's a huge amount of cells, microbial cells in our body. Some calculation indicated that much more microbial cells than our own cells. And even doctors, they can tell good microbiome, bad microbiome, but it's childish distinguish. So it's the same bacteria sometimes that can cause disease as a pathogen. It's also a requirement for your health. So we know we have those two opposite, and we have no tools how to move in this spectrum. What is between?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Let me ask you this, Doctor. What's the takeaway message that you hope readers have after reading your book? What do you hope sticks with them as far as your understanding of biology and even Kabbalah?
Actually, it was not purpose to teach them biology. There are a lot of books and textbooks and popular books about different biological aspects. And again, as I thought, it was not my purpose to teach Kabbalah. I do have several chapters in my book where I introduce those principles that I need further to explore, to use as a tools. I think the most important message is it's about changing of system of thinking. To realize that it depends, it's not only what you see, it depends from what point you see. Selecting point.
Yeah.
And probably if I need to just summarize in one sentence what is the most important message, it's people need to realize difference between information and knowledge. And we as scientists contributed very much in this interpretation when we write, for example, proposal, and we write our purpose to gain knowledge about transmission of virus. But truth is, it's not what we really plan or deliver. We gain information. You understand? Because knowledge is always personal. It includes some personal experience. And modern science is trying to avoid any subjectivity, right? This criteria, any person needs to come in your place and have the same exactly results if they follow. But it's not true for life, biological life, because it's so diverse, so complex, and so dynamic. Next day, it will be different situation, different context. And especially when we're talking about epidemics, it's very important to remember about this.
Yeah. Information versus knowledge. Knowledge implies understanding.
Understanding at this upper level, it's more related to wisdom. In fact, I mentioned the name of Akov, who proposed this pyramid. He also wanted to include understanding a separate layer, but probably not many people accept it. What is difference between understanding and wisdom, right? Yeah. But in Kabbalah, it's very well defined. So one of highest Sefirot, Chachma, it literally means wisdom, and Bina, another Sefirot, means understanding. Yeah. And relation between them, it's very much investigated and used as a tool. You see how it's important have this orientation in those concepts.
Yeah. It's a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating outlook. It is a fascinating concept. And of course, the concepts are contained within the pages of this wonderful book. The name of the book is 10 Dimensions of Kabbalistic Biology, the Abridged Edition, A Scientist's Guide to Entering the Invisible World of Life. It is written by Dr. Michael Kosoy. It is a thought-provoking invitation to view biology as a multi-layered system of organization, information, and meaning. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Logan, for having me.
I appreciate your time, your insight, the wonderful work you've done on this book, and the time you spent to explain all of this to me and to the audience today. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for the Global Book Network. So long for now.